Welcome to I Could Never, a show all about non-monogamy and the many ways it can look. I'm Genevieve from Polyamory on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-host and partner, Ishik.
AKA Shrimpy McGee.
Yeah.
AKA the old block boy. AKA that guy over there.
You really lost steam on your made-up nicknames.
But it is just us today.
It's just us today.
It is just us today because this is, sadly, for all of you, the season 3 finale.
So season 3 has come to an end, but we did want to give another Q&A episode before we head off on our short break.
But before we can do that, we have to have one more old friend tumbling by, a tired old man rocking in his rocking chair, saying, I remember the good old days when we used to viber vent.
It's viber vent time, my friends. If you are new here, we start every episode, whether it is an interview or a Q&A, with a little icebreaker called Viber Vent, where we talk about something that we are either vibing about this week that we're happy about, or something that we are venting about that we need to get off of our chest. So I am vibing
Why don't
today.
You start us off.
Yeah, today I am vibing. If you are watching this is going to be released on Thanksgiving Day. If you're in the US, if you're outside of the US, that probably doesn't matter much at all to you. But I also, on my other channel, Chill Polyamory on YouTube, I have a review of a short film by a polyamorous person called Coming Out Polyamorous for Thanksgiving. That's what it's called.
It's not a mouthful or anything.
No, and it's great. It's on that YouTube channel, I do a lot of reviews of movies and TV shows, and it's a lot of trash representation. At the end of the day, yes, more of us telling our own stories, So, and also go check it out because it is on YouTube now. Their full 23-minute movie, I think, something like that. Just search for Coming Out Polyamorous for Thanksgiving. Anyway.
Plus, it'll teach your algorithm to give you more polyamorous content. Like our podcast. So just, Ouroboros this shit. Head and ass of Chill Polyamory. So I'm going to be vibing, I think.
You're vibing today?
I think I'm going to be vibing as well. I had a date last night. It went well, and I'll probably see them again soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also I'll say that I'm vibing because we had a little bit of a conflict because we had sort of talked about me checking in and letting you know if I was coming home or not. And, or I think the phrasing was that I was staying the night or not. And I didn't end up staying the night, but I ended up staying out quite late. And so while I had in theory followed the letter of the law, as it were, it was kind of ignoring the spirit of the law, which is having you have a good understanding of what to expect,
yeah,
right?
I just like to know what to expect.
We had a little conflict about it earlier today, and then, just tonight we're recording, and I feel healed enough to talk about it, share it with you all, so it must be doing pretty good. I don't know. Would you say you're feeling okay?
Yeah, no, I'm feeling good. And like I said, you have given me plenty of grace when I have just, lost track of time or didn't 100% follow through on something I said I would do. And it's not that we want to just say, oh, it doesn't matter, I feel nothing. I was annoyed, and I said I was annoyed this morning, and I can hold both. And I'm excited that you met somebody new that you're excited about, or that you had a nice time with at the very least. And that is also true. Actually, that was the majority of my feeling, was cool, I'm glad it went well. I didn't like not knowing what was going to happen next, insofar as should I wake up and feed the dogs, So
Yeah.
That sort of thing was something we can tweak, but I think it's always good to flex that muscle of it can be both, of I need it to go slightly different next time. And I see you weren't trying to hurt me, you weren't malicious. And I'm not going to shove one of those things down to hyper focus on the other in either direction.
Even before you had said anything, I had kind of realized oh man, I didn't update her in a way that I probably should have. And then when you told me as much, I reaffirmed that with you. And also when I had my own feelings about how certain things were phrased, there was space for that too.
It's just, yeah, I mean, I think it's also coming from a place of like you and I have over a decade of security and stability together. So if it was a little bit less secure of a relationship, or if it was a person that I felt fearful of, or like if there were other elements that didn't feel stable, I might have had a bigger reaction, and that's okay too. Like, I guess in recounting it, I don't want people to be like, oh, well, it's just, I'm never going to be dysregulated. I wasn't dysregulated this time,
Yeah.
but if shit was harder, if I was like really sick or if I had a lot of other things going on, maybe I would have like less juice in the tank and I might be a little bit more upset. But today I felt more, yeah, able to hold multiple things is true, which is, it gets easier with practice, too. So
Well, with that, with us having aired our dirty laundry out to the world,
filthy.
filthy, filthy laundry. Let's get into some Q's, man. Let's get into
Yeah.
some A's.
Hmm?
I've said what I said. Okay. Hi there. I am solo poly and a relationship anarchist, and recently have reached the end of a great non-committal connection that turned sort of sour. They have expressed to me that they are ambiamorous, and throughout the course of our about 8-month relationship, the person had a pattern of very hot and cold behavior centered around avoidant attachment. And although we are currently on speaking terms and they are attempting to rebuild a friendship with me, I am currently needing space to decide if that is something that I am even interested in at this point. I'm noticing that they're displaying far more communication and opening up now than before when we were consistently seeing each other, which was a big factor in us eventually drifting up further apart. Present day, they have met someone new who wants to be monogamous with them, therefore severing any possible romantic connection between us as well. Wondering if you would be open to discussing the polyam ambiamorous dynamic a little more in depth. I'm very curious about your perspective as well as how you've seen similar situations play out, and furthermore, the insecurities that come up within this dynamic.
So there's not as just a single way. Ambiamory, if that's a new term for anybody, ambiamory is where somebody doesn't feel like polyamory is how they always have to love. They might see it more as a choice or a take it or leave it, or whatever relationship happens. They could be monogamous happily. They could be polyamorous happily. There's not a single one way that goes. Like if I had a friends with benefits that was like, oh, I might go back to monogamy, and I didn't feel a strong drive to have something like intertwined, if I didn't want a dailiness with them, if I felt pretty relaxed in that connection, then I might not feel hurt if they said, hey, I'm going back to monogamy. But if I was like building something consistently over years with somebody and they wanted to go back to monogamy, that's a much more delicate transition.
I think that in general, right, like there's two ways that I would kind of speak to this question. The first is the general premise of polyamory and ambiamory. Like there's no hard and fast reason why that pairing can't work at all. Like it definitely can, right? Like the whole premise of an ambiamorous person is that they absolutely can engage in a polyamorous dynamic. They just don't necessarily need it. Like on its surface, that's the answer, right? It's just like short and sweet. That is fine. That being said, I think it's being framed by this specific personal story with this specific person who identifies as ambiamorous, right? And I don't want to conflate those two things too much because this person has been engaging in during the relationship in hot and cold behavior, distancing, and then only when there's like now distance are they like more consistent and all this stuff. And so I don't want to be too cold, especially because I'm reading into a lot of, we, as always, we have just this little bit. So, but like, there's almost a vibe of like keeping the author on the back burner, as like an option. I don't know. Do you feel like that's a misread?
Maybe. I think that's an uncharitable read. It doesn't mean it's false, right? We are not in that person's head. I think the person asking this question, it's like, how do you handle hot, cold? How do you handle the possibility that this person who has acted this way in the past might act this way again in the future? What would you need in a friendship? What is friendship, especially if they go back to monogamy? Because friends, for me, we can fuck sometimes, right? So what is friendship then? And I think getting like really clear, if somebody ever says, oh, let's stay friends, I really want to know, like, what does that mean? And is that on purpose? And is that with like a thoughtfulness in mind of what we do and what we definitely don't do anymore? So if somebody is down to communicate like that, then you can see what you see.
Yeah, I mean, and I think one of the things that I kind of want to highlight for the rest of the viewers and listeners, specifically, it's the element of the insecurities that come up within the specific dynamic of polyamorous, ambiamorous pairing. And I think in that question is an implication that there is an inherent insecurity that comes from an ambiamorous person not being like committed to polyamory.
Mm.
And I want to actually like dispel that and push back on that, because I don't actually think that's necessarily the case. And frankly, I kind of experience it the same way that, you know, people who are either like gay or straight experience or talk about bisexual people, where it's like, well, they haven't chosen, so they're not trustworthy, they're not committed to this type of relationship. They are flexible in the structure. That doesn't mean that they're flexible with the relationship. So yeah, I hope that answered and maybe gave some new terms for anyone who's never heard about ambiamory before. Okay, on to the next question. As someone who has been in a polyam relationship for about a year now, one of the lessons I've learned is the importance of situational awareness and how I can maintain healthy relationships even when, quote, ignoring common advice found in literature, podcasts, etc. What do you think is an absolute must in a polyamorous relationship? What advice shouldn't be ignored? I mean, it's an interesting framing because it starts out with being okay with ignoring advice, but then asking our advice.
I'm going to ignore advice, but what's your advice?
But what's your advice
about that? No, I get what you're saying.
I get the premise, right? Like that some things are not one size fits all and they can be really situational. Having great people in my life who I can trust to be good faith actors who aren't coming in bad faith or aren't manipulative or any of these things. And so I'm like, oh yeah, you speak honestly, you share honestly, and that's the best thing you can do. And like when that comes to a bad faith actor, somebody who's not coming trying to also treat you with respect and also treat you with a lot of care and consideration, that advice actually doesn't apply very well. So I do actually really see where the question is coming from, because yeah, these things aren't always one size fits all.
I have been making videos online for about 5 years and change. And every time I would say something declarative like this often or this always, then someone would say, well, this is my situation and how it doesn't apply. And I was like, damn, right? I don't want to fill in the gaps of what I don't know with what I assume, because then that's not seeing the person in front of me. So going to what is a must in your relating is like, I don't want to tell someone else's story for them, So if somebody is not texting me back, I don't want to assume why. I might say, hey, is there a reason that I didn't hear from you? Would you not want to text as often? Is there, I would want to ask questions with genuine curiosity to fill in the gaps of their story with the rest of their story and not tell it for them. So I'd say in general, that helps me avoid jumping to conclusions, and it helps like minimize miscommunication because I'm actually trying to get the accurate picture of things. So you referenced that sometimes people are acting in bad faith, and I think that is good to keep an eye on. So with the same token of like, I don't want to assume bad intent, I also don't want to ignore patterns. And I have dated people and brought close to people to me people who were actively lying regularly as a pattern. And I have had people in my life that I've had to not speak to anymore at all because every time we spoke, they were disrespectful and that behavior didn't change. And like, I don't want to always assume good intent either, or assume an interest in changing, even if they say they know what they're doing, even if they say, oh, I know I need to change this or I'm working on this. What are they doing? So I pay attention to the patterns.
You cannot date a future version of a person. You can only date the person in front of you right now, right? Do not date with the expectation that they will be any different than they are now. If you do not like dating the person they are now, you should not date them.
In addition to not just dating someone's potential, a polyamorous add-on to that is don't expect that someone's polyamory is going to change in their structure. So, for example, sometimes people will say, oh, well, my wife and I, we've got a very rigid hierarchy with all these rules, and we're working on it and it's going to get better. What does that word mean? Are y'all going to therapy every other week? Are you talking about why there's a need for control or power? Or like, are you actually breaking down these things and having real talks? Is there an effort to stop doing some of the things? Like, I actually want to know if somebody is working towards a goal of changing their type of polyamory, a polyamory that would work more for me. What is the path from A to B, and are there steps being taken toward it? Because look, y'all can live however you want to live, but I don't want to be holding on, waiting for someday, waiting for, oh, well, once this rough patch ends, then we'll start working on it. Or, oh, they're really depressed right now, so I didn't want to bring it up. I'll talk to them next month. Like, you can be waiting for years in that pattern. And that is just something that, again, I don't demonize the person, but I just say, okay, if these are the current conditions, this is how far I'll probably have to be. And I've done that with people who wanted to date me, and I was like, oh, your girlfriend won't let me near your space, and we'll be able to cancel our dates if she's having a bad day. Like, sorry, you're really sweet and seem awesome, and we have a bunch of mutual friends, and I'm definitely not going to go on a date with you. I'm so sorry, because I would have a bad time. That would bring out the worst in me. I think that would create conflict with us. And I know that going in, no, And they were disappointed, and they were like, oh, they reached out to me again 6 months later. I was like, cool, yeah, what's the situation? Had not changed. And I was so glad I was not along for that ride.
Yeah, that would have been 6 months of your life that would have probably been fucking shitty.
And then I also would have been pissed at myself, for sticking in something that I knew didn't work for me. So again, look at patterns and look at what is rather than what could one day be.
I also actually have one other one in terms of more specifically about polyamory. Define your terms. Define all of the terms. What does being in a relationship mean? What does committed mean? What does boyfriend or girlfriend mean? What does partner mean? What does sex mean? Anytime you use an idea that, or a term that you think has a general meaning, everybody knows what that means, but they don't. Everyone has a different definition of that. And honestly, that does also apply to monogamy. It just becomes absolutely necessary in non-monogamy. So
we had that in early days when I said I was going to have a sleepover with someone. And you're like, so are you just crashing on their sofa, or are you fucking?
Yeah, are you braiding each other's hair, or are you sucking their dick, right? Like, what's happening? And I don't necessarily need to know the specific sex act, but is it a sex act that's going to be happening, or is it just you are literally crashing at their place?
Yeah.
Right?
Clarity. And that the reason I also mentioned that example is because when you're doing something in non-normative relationships, especially if you are newer or it is a newer thing to you, there can be discomfort, which is where euphemism can come in. And so that has historically been I would have tightness around old shame or old fear of upsetting, so I would say the nicer sounding thing in my mind and be unclear. And when it comes to labels and things, sometimes people feel a lack of clarity for themselves. So if they can't get clear with themselves, they definitely can't get clear with you. At least understand where they're at with that. So if I'm on a date with somebody and I ask, so what does your polyamory look like? What do your relationships look like in day to day, week to week? What are your agreements? And they don't have clear answers for that. That's good to know. That's good to know because you probably won't be able to manage my expectations in the way that I need. I'm going to then adjust accordingly. I'm going to treat all of that as unpredictable or could change at any time or, and the same with a label. If somebody's like, oh, I see you as a partner, I'm still kind of figuring out what partner means for me. Okay, well, when I hear partner, I think this, but I'm hearing you that it's kind of this abstract cloud. So let's keep checking in then. There can be unknowns, you can be unclear, but at least talk about what still feels blurry. So that you're not thinking there's clarity when there's not and when it could change,
Yeah. So there's a bunch of them, actually.
Yeah. Do that all the time, always. Okay? Next question. Me and one of the people I love most in the world recently moved to different cities about 3 hours apart. I've noticed that I'm the one traveling more often for us to meet, and when I communicated this, I learned that it's not so simple for her to travel to visit me. After some frustration, I realized the feeling of missing her is ultimately my responsibility to manage. At the same time, this kind of grief has made me feel less willing to travel lately. I've been wondering if maybe I'm doing that unconsciously to get a reaction from her, but I don't think that's the case. How do you balance expressing your needs, dealing with the sadness of missing someone, and respecting each person's limits?
I mean, first off, I just want to validate that that sounds really difficult, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness that you're bringing to it. I'm hearing a lot of like contemplation and trying to not be, jumping to conclusions or being rash or assigning blame. I just want to validate that. That's really nice.
Yeah, and it's a very real thing for a lot of us, like self included, who have distanced love, that it's not like 50-50 is rare in terms of what people's capabilities are, right? And I don't know what your partner's limitations are, but plenty of things can get in the way of somebody having ease with movement, whether that's a very restrictive job or they have children or financial stressors. Traveling costs money, even if you are driving rather than needing a plane ticket, like any kind of travel or lodging, that adds up. I appreciate, like he was saying, I appreciate that you are sort of reflecting on your own motives. Is like, I haven't really wanted to travel. Is that at her? Maybe not. Like I think those questions are always good. Is like, why am I doing this? And do I like why I'm doing this? I think it never hurts to ask why, but disappointment and also ache with the change. If you used to have something local and you could see them all the time, like there's going to be grief with tangible loss of physical time and touch with each other, and it's nobody's fault. It doesn't sound like anybody is deliberately making it hard to connect or, is not willing to put in the effort. There's a big difference between can't and won't, and so if that's the case and there's love and there's just limitations, can you, as we often say, is like stay on the same team and say like, how can we connect?
Frame those needs, frame those feelings, frame those frustrations as clearly not an attack. I know that you're upset too, but this sucks. I'm feeling really shitty about it today. And making it clear you haven't done anything wrong. Co-regulating together about that, commiserating about how it's hard for both of you and that you are both dealing with a difficult situation together. And can even be a form of connecting it, because then you're both hearing how much you care about each other, right? Like the frustration that you're feeling is, I want more of you in my life. That's actually a really sweet thing to say, and to be able to share with each other. It's the same when you're going through any kind of hardship with somebody. Like, this sucks, this is hard, and I wouldn't want to go through it without you.
Yeah. So next question, is it unethical to seek out other romantic connections when something's lacking in a current relationship? So I'm going to summarize a little bit of this person's longer email, but essentially this person and their partner have been sexually non-monogamous and have started talking about being romantically non-monogamous as well. Her partner has always said that he doesn't see himself having the capacity for more than one romantic partner, but would be supportive if that's something that she would want. He's neurodivergent with a limited social battery. His brain is quite analytical and practical, she says, so like social and emotional connections take a bit more effort. She is saying that he has always agreed that one partner not being able to meet every need makes total sense. However, the recent conversation has created feelings of inadequacy. She says, I am having trouble discerning if there's an unmet need, if this is something I should be asking my nesting partner to make an effort to meet, or if it makes sense to foster other connections where that comes a bit more easily. She says, I do not want to hold this against him or make him feel inadequate. I do want to honor my needs for romance and feeling spiritually connected.
Our needs are our needs. We have no control over that, right? And so I'm not hearing you taking issue with your own needs necessarily, but sort of like emotions just sort of happen. We don't control that, right? So that's the first thing I'll say. If he is experiencing feelings of inadequacy, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have done something to cause that.
That's true.
And I never want to just be like, that's his responsibility to deal with. I think that's a little bit of a oversimplification, because things can trigger certain feelings. but they aren't necessarily the cause of those feelings. And I think that if by his own admission, by your calculation, and by everything you're describing, that kind of connection, that kind of emotional, spiritual, I think as you described it, connection isn't something that really comes particularly easily, if at all, for him. Trying to foster that, like his ability to do it, if that just is not something he is able to do, is wasted effort, or is just not going to produce an outcome where anyone is feeling good. I think that, if anything, could probably foster more feelings of inadequacy if there's this constant expectation that that he needs to fill a need that he just kind of can't.
I think also it's helpful to look at like, what am I saying is like valuable? So sometimes people who are quite introverted will say, oh, my partner's very extroverted, wants to go out a lot, wants people to go out to parties and stuff with. I feel inadequate because I'm not as fun, I'm not going out, I'm not cool, da 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 da. So is there a value judgment against just how your partner naturally operates in the world? Because being introverted, being a little bit more analytical, just having your brain function differently, all of that is totally valid, a way to be. That's a type of person to be. And there are a lot of beautiful traits and upsides to that can be like focused on and celebrated. Like, I love the way your brain works, or I love being cozy inside with my introverted partner, right? Instead of focusing on it as a lack, Emotional connection, really beautiful, really lovely. An analytical brain who can solve puzzles and like think through problems with you, also cool, also lovely. And do these have to be like versus each other?
So I will read a question. It is a brief and short question directed directly at me. Genevieve, you started giving visibility to one of your partners on Instagram, the blacksmith. Why them?
Yeah, so it's such a unique, so I've often, like, even with you, who I've been with for, I don't know, 13 years, 11 years, I don't know, more than 10, we lose track. It'll be 12 in 2026.
12 in 2026.
Only in the podcast have you become front facing, because we were talking about it as an idea and you were like, let's do it together. So we decided to collaborate on that. Like, so that made sense. So I've, Ishik is now in video on YouTube. He's now, a lot of you know him pretty well. With my partner, Reese, who is a blacksmith, he was already booked to be a podcast guest before I started dating him. That is how I met him. And so he was already planned to be platformed when I started dating him. So that was also kind of a unique situation rather than a decision. I'm going to now show my other boyfriend. It was sort of like on episode 1 of season 3, hey, so we're dating now. Let's all talk about it, And I don't know how relatable that might be.
And honestly, we were excited. I was excited. You were excited. Everyone was excited to talk about it on the podcast. So I think it was a natural kind of thing that sort of came out of the circumstances of what were happening.
I don't know. Historically, I've not really given a lot of specifics about my other partners because I'm the one who chose to be quite public. And I do share personal anecdotes, and I get a little wary of like people being online sleuths and like putting things together and being able to tell someone else's story based off of information that I've given. And so now, with having 2 of my significant partners be quite public by, design and partially a little bit by circumstance, there is a lot of talk behind the scenes about what gets shared. When I shared a story about, I'm going to fly to Ireland to go meet Reese and Reese's partner, all 3 of us were like looking at the text, and you looked at it too, and we're like, oh, this word might have a connotation. Let's like switch it out for a synonym, like, and
especially because I've been on the back end of that not going without that level of consideration, how poorly that can be received. Where like one word difference between one version of a story and another can set people off and make them think, oh, this person sucks.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, I want anyone who can be identified to feel as much as possible in control of their own narrative at this point, because there have been times where The way that I told a story wound up negatively affecting somebody offline. And so when it comes to the average person's dilemma of like, who do I share on social media? I think there are some of that is applicable in terms of like talking with everybody who might be affected of like, what is your comfort with being seen in this way? But in general, I do encourage people to consider, who are you showing and who are you not showing and why? Because sometimes people will fall into a place of, I want a front-facing partner that would be a bit more socially acceptable, or that, my parents approve of, or, and the people that I'm dating over here, they stay in the shadows a bit. Why, right? Sometimes it's for safety reasons. If somebody's job might be at risk, if their polyamory gets revealed and one partner was already public facing, okay, then that sometimes behind the scenes gets compensated for, where you're like, oh, let's celebrate you offline, or let's be out to who we can be out. And I want to, give you some fanfare since we're all collectively, strategically, doing this certain presentation for safety. But a lot of times it's not for safety. A lot of times people want to present a public image that still has some shame, or that might have some bias, or that might have some like fear in the mix, and just like understand your own reasons for it.
Regular check-ins about it too, right? It's not like, okay, we've made the decision and it's done, right? If somebody develops feelings like maybe they agreed to some, like, oh, I don't want to be front-facing on social media a lot, and they were fine with that decision, and then one day they see you post an anniversary photo with your other partner, and then they realize that their anniversary with you didn't get celebrated. And that brings up feelings, right? Okay, have another conversation. Does it require a change, or does it just need to be talked about? Maybe a little bit of extra attention is given to the anniversary next time, or the next special event, or whatever.
And now that we're kind of expanding on it, when you're saying, to compensate, I wonder if partially why I might like share Reese a bit more is not just because he takes pictures and we don't have like a lot of pictures, but also because he's long distance and I see him every 2 months, And so celebrating him a bit more in that way is like a nice way to balance out the fact that I live with you and see you every day and work with you. You know what I mean? It's like they're asymmetrical balance and no one's keeping score. I'm actually kind of landing on this part in real time.
But that does make a lot of sense. And while it's not something that we've necessarily like actively been like, oh, you should post him more because whatever, I think I almost kind of experienced that and felt that in a way. I think because it's an extension of how I also feel like your time that you do get with him is really precious, and like your date nights on the phone and video chats and stuff like that is really important. Like because of that imbalance around actual like physical shared space, these things are really, really important, and they have to take really high priority, right? And so I think while I also hadn't really considered the social media element, that may have been one of the reasons why it never even fucking occurred to me of like, why am I not in more photos? I don't really fucking want to be, frankly. There's a reason I'm on social media.
On Instagram, yeah.
It's great. It's so good. It's so good, everyone. I can't.
If you want to know peace.
If you want any peace in your world, it's so sick.
Yeah. So case by case. But this is an important conversation to have, because social media is part of our social life, and who we share, it says something whether we want it to or not, or it brings up questions that we want to have the answers to,
Yeah. Bada boom.
So this is a relationship escalator question. I'm my partner's only partner. I'm not interested in ever nesting. Have you ever felt like you're holding your partner back from finding something more serious? So relationship escalator, it's the idea that you have certain steps that you should take to always be moving, always be growing in a relationship. And the idea of nesting is living together. So this person doesn't want to live with their partner and their partner's not with anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to just go ahead and start right off by pushing back on the premise that not nesting with somebody is not serious.
Mm.
I actually don't agree with that because I think it is impossible to engage in non-monogamy or polyamory and not have to challenge the relationship escalator to some degree. When you are saying something like finding something more serious, I don't think that these things are mutually exclusive. Being not nested and being serious, these can coexist.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are you devaluing your own relationship as unserious just because you don't want to be roommates, right? Some relationships fare better because they never moved in with each other because they would be terrible roommates, right? It's like, what's best for the relationship?
I mean, we know people who have their relationship has gotten better after they moved out.
Moved out.
Like moving out, no longer cohabitating, going from having all of these issues and all of these conflicts all the time to suddenly actually everything is great because the underlying relationship, the underlying connection is a positive, happy connection, but you just don't like how they deal with fucking laundry or dishes or whatever. And they are not a prerequisite for being in love or being in romantic partnership.
Yeah. If they want to be with you and they're happy with how things are, then why is that a bad thing? If they want to be with you and they want you to live with them and they don't want to be with anybody else, but they're unhappy that they aren't going to be living with you and they want you to change, then that's a conflict that is worth talking about of like, this could be an incompatibility of this shape of relationship. But it sounds like if you're polyamorous, that the door's open, that if they want to live with somebody, they could find a good roommate partner, you know? So the idea that you are holding a partner back, I don't think you have that much power, right? Like if they want to go live with somebody, they can do that, right? I just would be wary of taking on too much responsibility for the life that your partner is building for themselves, you know?
Mm.
So.
Okay, next question.
Next question.
So I will be summarizing some parts of this. How do I navigate having discretion in what info I share about my connections and feelings without it feeling sneaky or secretive? How can you tell what information you are not sharing because you don't want to connect about it with the person versus because of fear or shame? Context: I live in a small place where you are only a few degrees removed from pretty much everyone, friends, coworkers, community, etc. Usually it feels like the norm to openly share ways that I'm connected to someone, but other times I don't want to share that information, for example, if that person is my crush or someone I used to see romantically. In those cases, I might share that I know them in community, but not how I am feeling about them or hoping to relate to them in the future. Also, I spent most of my life in the closet, and when I had my first queer relationship, I kept it a secret at work because we used to both work there. I was very open about the relationship with my friends and chosen family, but also feared being seen by people from work. I'm still overcoming years of shame and secrecy, even from myself, and I feel the rush of secrecy come up when I don't share something.
I mean, the biggest thing that jumps out to me is that you have this history of feeling shame and that you had this very specific experience of not only being closeted, but at work hiding a queer relationship. That wears on us when we feel like we have to withhold, when we feel like harm will come our way, and maybe harm would have come your way, you know, if you shared. And I know a lot of people also come from just a very conservative upbringing or religious upbringing where shame is like baked into things, you know. That's fraught when we have shame or when we've been in environments where it was not safe to share. So that's usually where I start is, you know, do I actually feel bad about this in general? Do I feel bad about who I hooked up with? Do I actually not want to be doing this? Like, is there something in me that doesn't like this information? No wrong answers. I just like to know. Do I actually feel shame? Maybe the shame also is coming from something that I don't want to adhere to anymore, right? I actually didn't hurt anybody sleeping with this person. And everything's great. Why do I feel shame? So I think before I started feeling more ease with talking openly about my life, I really had a lot more self exploration of my own feelings of tightness around what I do or don't do and why. Once I got and continue to get clear on what I'm proud of or what I don't feel ashamed about, then it becomes a lot more of a logistical question of like, is this an appropriate setting for me to talk about who I slept with last night? Would I tell my boss that? Maybe not, you know? And so then it just becomes like a logistical calculation rather than the shame piece. It stands out to me as well that you said you're in a small community, and that's very real, that there can be sort of like self-protectiveness just inherent, even if you're not doing anything wrong. If you don't want people to gossip, or if your housing is controlled by somebody who's like your neighbor's friend, or you know what I mean? It's like if there's a little bit of like risk awareness of judgmental people, all of that, I think, also does go back to like reasoning, you know, and it's okay if there is a very tangible risk or threat. And does it have to be all or nothing? You know, are there some soft spaces you can land where you can like gush and say everything, and then you very thoughtfully decide which spaces are safe for you, which people are safe for you?
I think learning to figure out when it's a shame-based reaction versus when it's just like a none of their fucking business kind of reaction, right? And I think that the example you gave of like, I don't need to tell my boss what I'm doing with my relationships and personal life versus like, I can't share this because I'll be a bad person, right? Like that distinction, that's a totally internal, that's only an internal job, right? And so whatever you can do to learn to distinguish those feelings from each other, that will be super beneficial, because there is no real like external marker for what distinguishes these feelings from each other.
Okay, next question. Is it possible for one person in a polyamorous relationship to practice kitchen table polyamory with their other partners and love interest, but their anchor partner doesn't? Would that still count as kitchen table polyamory if the anchor partner doesn't want to participate? If kitchen table polyamory is a new term for anybody, it's just everybody in the polycule, everybody that is dating everybody else is comfortable sitting around the kitchen table. You all know each other and are friendly.
What I'm hearing when I hear this question is, are two people who are in polyamorous relationship with each other who want varying levels of involvement with their metamors, their partners, able to coexist, right? Like that's my takeaway from the question, right? Because the actual question is, can you have kitchen table if your other person doesn't want to? And like technically no, right? Like if you and I are in relationship and I want kitchen table polyamory where my partners are all sitting around the table together and you don't want to sit at the table, then that is not kitchen table polyamory. But that doesn't mean that we are incompatible, right? And so if that's the underlying question, that is not the case, right? There can still be compatibility. When I'm with another partner and their partners and whatever, I can have that level of connection and closeness and involvement in metamors and family and all those things. And then in this dynamic with this partner, that doesn't happen, right? Like these are not incompatible needs. Everyone's needs can be met. Everyone's desire for the level of involvement and connection and communication with other partners is technically compatible and can be figured out.
Yeah, I mean, with the question of does it count as kitchen table polyamory, is there stress in that? Like sometimes people identify themselves, and I'm not saying you are, it's not in this question, but just in general, I've seen people have distress of like, my ethos is kitchen table. I think everyone should. I want all my partners. And it's like, yeah, but everybody has bodily autonomy too, right? And they don't got to be in any room they don't want to be in. If they're not wanting to meet somebody, then it's not going to go great if you try and force the meet, you know, because if they don't want to be there, everyone will feel that, you know? So I just try not to force anything in any direction. I am curious, like if someone's like, nope, I'm not going to meet, never going to meet. I'm like, why? You know, and can that be softened a little bit so I can understand? Not so I can change them, but I just want to know, like, is there fear, or did something bad happen the last time you met someone? Or like, I don't want to come with any, like, this is how it should be. Again, I'm not saying you're saying that, but I see that a lot.
Yeah. And also, or do they just not like the other person?
Sometimes that happens, and that can function too, because they're not dating each other, right? We have like family members who don't get along, you know, we have like friends that aren't each other's favorite person, you know, everybody can decide how close or how far they want to be to other people. And just because we are close with them doesn't mean that we get to know what's best for their relationships, including their relationships with our other partners. Be mindful if your mind ever gets like fixated on a picture. I am successful if it looks like this. I'm doing polyamory good if it looks like that, right? If your brain is ever locked into a picture of success, then sometimes it can get quite tunnel vision or narrow and a little bit either or, in group, out group, boxing in, rather than like, I don't know, relationships are going to ebb and flow and do what they do. And sometimes we'll want to hang out and sometimes we won't. And maybe that'll change and maybe that won't. You know what I mean? Like, can there be like a little bit more easing and letting there be some openness to whatever is true in this moment without being fatalistic that this is always how it is?
Kitchen table polyamory has gotten kind of like this is a good way reputation. This is a good way of doing polyamory versus other types. And I personally don't ascribe to that at all. I do not think that something like kitchen table polyamory is a value judgment. It is a descriptor.
Yes.
Right? I don't think it is necessarily something that should be strived for because it is better or the pinnacle or what have you. It is a description of a way that a relationship structure looks. That is it. It is a value judgmentless descriptor.
You wanted to read one more?
Yes. So one last question for you fine folks. How do you slow down a hot new romance for the comfort of another partner so you make it less threatening for them?
Ooh.
Ooh. Going out on a spicy note.
Why?
Don't like that
So
question.
the premise is, in the question, it is just a given that you slow down a romance to help another partner. Why is that a given?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that a given?
I think the answer is you explain that they aren't a threat.
You show that they aren't.
Yes, I think that's even better. You show that this hot new romance is not a threat to your existing partner, right? Yeah, you have a new dynamic with this person. You're excited about this person. But if you are staying consistent and showing up for your existing partner, that makes it not a threat, right? Or at least makes it feel like less of a threat.
Mm-hmm.
And you establish trust that you're not going anywhere, that you're not going to fucking leave them because you're excited and interested in this new person, that this new person isn't more or better than they are. They are just another person that you're excited about.
Shrinking one relationship to secure another, it ties that person's safety with how small the other relationship is. So if that relationship ever wants to get bigger, that stress will come back, because it's like, oh, well, my safety was tied to that being small, so that should stay small. I'm not saying this is a conscious thought or that your partner is even saying this. I understand and empathize with the panic and overwhelm that's like, please God, make it stop, right? Like, I get that. And if sustained, happy non-monogamy is what's wanted, the only way through it is through it. So like he's saying, be thoughtful, be careful, uphold your agreements, right? Do not drop one partner for another. Don't be like on your phone, sexting with your new person and ignoring your existing partner. Like, you want to not be a dick about it, and to an extent, the hinge partner, the person in the middle, can you double down on love and reassurances and so on? Your partner will have to do their own work, because this, non-monogamy can bring up every trauma and insecurity and thing that you thought was long dealt with. Hey, hello again. Here it is again. It's going to happen. So we have our own internal work to do as well. But going through having this relationship grow and your partner be safe is the only way I've ever seen that be safe long term. If comfort is, I'll go slow over here, then that also sets a precedent for every time your existing partner is distressed, that it's like tooth and nail every step of the way. I've seen it play out like this over and over again, that every little tiny bit of growth and acceleration with this other person is a fight, is a challenge, is an ordeal, because Safety is being linked to how much you like the other person, what you're doing with the other person. Safety is linked to something beyond their control, you know?
Yeah, and to kind of put it another way, like what you're saying, right? Like if this person's safety is dependent on this person being small or this relationship being small, right? Like you need to develop a new way of establishing safety for this person, right? Like that's what you're saying. But to kind of condense it, it's like that is not a sustainable thing. What is a more sustainable way of communicating and clarifying this existing relationship's security and safety?
If safety could be instead rooted in how you treat each other and saying, I'm not going to surprise you with anything. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to show you that what I've said is what I'm going to do, you know, that everything you can expect of me is how it's going to play out. Like that is actually patterns in your own relationship with your existing partner, setting up patterns and groundwork of being able to trust each other. Then people outside the relationship can come and go, up and down. And if this still feels secure, then that won't be a threat. So that will be it for today. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions. I hope it was helpful. As always, just take what rings true and leave the rest. Maybe that's meant for somebody else. If you submitted a question that we did not have time to answer today, there are other ways to get in touch. I offer a pen pal service on Patreon where you can write to me anytime and I'll send a reply within a week. That's patreon.com/chillpolyamory. I also offer one-on-one video chats for solo, duo, or trio groups. And that is on chillpolyamory.com. So you don't have to figure out anything alone. If you want to chat, I'm available.
And you should definitely do that. She's great. I can personally attest.
Okay.
I just want to say this is, the final, official final episode of season 3. And I want to share my heartfelt thanks to all of our viewers, all of our listeners, especially, with when we get these kinds of questions or other comments on videos on YouTube or on shorts on various socials, people who express their appreciation for what we do and all those kind words mean so much. They've absolutely brought us both to tears at various points. So thank you all so much for your lovely words. And it brings me so much joy that we can be of support to non-monogamous people all over the world who are trying to make this work and trying to figure out how to live their best lives. I don't know. I love you all. You're great.
It's really rewarding. And we've talked earlier about that it can feel like putting our neck out a bit of like just sharing a lot about our personal lives. I have often felt quite vulnerable, but I always get that energy back tenfold. And it's so lovely to see how many people are out there wanting to break norms, wanting to love the way that they want to love, and that you are just wanting to be the best version of yourself is inspirational to me. So I'm grateful every time I hear one of your stories.
I also, we will be going on hiatus for several months, but during that hiatus, for anyone who's finding the podcast or listening, coming in, we will be lining up guests for once we start production in a few months. And we are always on the lookout for more stories to share. So especially interested in hearing from folks who are from Asia or from Africa, or indigenous peoples from around the world. These stories are often very underrepresented in media in general, but especially in non-monogamous spaces, and they're really important. So, if you are part of any of these groups, or if you just practice non-monogamy in a way that you feel like it hasn't been talked about on the show or it isn't talked about in general, feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at icouldneverpod@gmail.com. That's icouldneverpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, what your non-monogamy looks like, and why you feel like you'd be a good story to share for the show. We'd love to hear from you. So.
And in the meantime, there's always lots more going on, even when the podcast is not airing. So if you want to see a film and TV analysis of non-monogamy on screen, you can go to my YouTube. That's Chill Polyamory. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's my second channel, Chill Polyamory 2, TOO. And that is where I have looser long-form Q&As, which I continue to do on my Patreon, patreon.com/chillpolyamory, where I hang out regularly and do Q&As just like this with my patrons there. And I'm on Instagram and TikTok and all of the places talking about all the things. So find me where you find stuff. I'm there, Chill Polyamory.
But yeah, this is a fine farewell for season 3.
I'll see you soon.
I'll see you soon to our viewers and listeners. This has been I Could Never. And remember that just because you've never done something before doesn't mean that you can't do it.
Bye.
Bye. One last bye for all of you.